Israel's podcast. I'm Michael Jaffe. We have an interesting phenomenon going on south of the border in the United States. We have a caravan of anywhere between 10,000 and 14,000 people coming up to the southern border with the intention of seeking asylum, but doing it in a very forceful way. Now, when an individual or a family tries to seek asylum from a home country that is specifically targeting them, they don't try to rush a border. They try to take refuge in the first country where they feel safe. Now, most of these are from Honduras. Most of these, most of the caravan travelers are from Honduras. And if you look at geography, I think we have a map here. There you go. If you look at the geography, the United States is not the first country outside of Honduras. It's actually, you have to go through several countries along the way. And according to international standards, and I think there are some treaties to this effect, when an asylee, a person trying to seek asylum, is called an asylee. When an asylee is trying to seek asylum, they are supposed to make that request in their first country where they are not endangered. And it's arguable that between Honduras, I think there's Guatemala, and I know there's Mexico along the way. So they should have, at the very least, tried to seek asylum in those countries, or if they really wanted to seek refuge in the United States, they should have gone to one of the embassies along the way. I think Mexico or the consulates, I think Mexico has at least 6, and done that. No, instead they are going to try to rush the border and then seek asylum, and enter illegally and then seek asylum. This is being manipulated, and this has in fact been organized by far leftists. There are far leftist activists both in Honduras and from the United States of America. It turns out that one of the organizations which are financing this and supporting this is a George Soros organization run by his son, Alex Soros. So anyway, we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to try to see how this is connected with the rush of Muslims and the almost takeover of Muslim migrants from the Middle East of Western Europe. All right? And one of the ways we're going to do this is by looking at what's happening in France. Something happened over the past month in France. Now, to understand what happened, we have to go back to March of 2018. This past March, almost about 10 months, I guess, is it 10 months already? No, it's not 10 months, I'm sorry. It's only about, it happened in March, so it's only about, I guess, 8 months ago. 8 months ago, there was a terrorist incident in a town of Trebet in France. I think it's pronounced Trebet. My French isn't perfect. I never formally learned French, so please excuse me for that one. So anyway, we had an occurrence where a policeman was killed by a terrorist who took a grocery store hostage in the town of Trebet. This French policeman's name, I have it here. I believe his name was Arnaud Beltrame. And I'll get that name, the complete name, in a moment. His name was Arnaud Jean-Georges Beltrame. Okay, and he almost single-handedly helped free the hostages in the supermarket. And how did he die? By exchanging himself for the last hostage. This happened on March the 23rd or the 24th. I think it was March the 23rd of this year. So the whole incident began on Friday. And I generally don't make a point of naming a terrorist, but in this case I will, because you might want to reference it in the future when you're talking to people about the effects of unchecked immigration where the immigrants are not, as a body, expected to assimilate in the values of the culture into which they're entering. Instead, they try to dominate or eradicate the host culture. But this terrorist's name was Redouane Lakdim. He was a 25-year-old French Moroccan. And he, anyway, it started in a place called Carcassonne, which is a town west of Trebeil and of, I guess, Marseille. And he basically hijacked a car. He shot both the passenger and the driver. The driver ended up dying from his wound. And so he hijacked the car and he drove from Carcassonne to the town of Trebeil. And along the way, he also shot at a group of policemen. I guess when he was in the process of hijacking the car, there was a group of policemen there, and he shot and injured one of the officers. And then he drove to Trebeil, where he killed 2 people and injured another person at a Super U supermarket. I guess there's a chain called Super U in France. Police surrounded the supermarket and they tried to negotiate with Lakdim. And finally, in order to save innocent lives, this hero, Arnaud Jean-Georges Beltrame, I believe he was a colonel in the police force, he exchanged himself. Shortly thereafter, there were shots fired in the Super U, and police rushed the supermarket, and they shot and killed Lakdim, but not before Lakdim shot Beltrame 3 times, I think it was 3 times, and knifed him and gave him a nasty knife knife wound to the neck. Beltrame died shortly afterwards in hospital. Before Lakdim stormed the supermarket, before he entered the supermarket, he was heard swearing allegiance to the Islamic States, to ISIS, and demanded the release of Salah Abdeslam, the only surviving suspect of the November 2015 Paris attacks. I don't know if you remember, but 3 years ago, almost to the day, 3 years ago, there was a wave of terrorist incidents in Paris, I think also in other places in France. And one of those was the Bataclan Theater, where there was an American band was giving a concert. And these terrorists, they call them gunmen these days, but why not call them what they are? It is terrorists, murderous terrorists, opened fire on a theater where a concert was taking place, and that was the Bataclan Theater. 190 people were killed at the Bataclan Theater. I don't think that includes the terrorists, but 90 people, assume that 90 innocent people lost their lives at the Bataclan Theater from a wave of pro-ISIS attacks in France. Anyway, this person, Redouane Lakdim, was demanding the release of the last terrorist who survived the I guess what was the police and army or whatever the counter-terrorist units were that stormed the theater and other parts of and other terrorist attacks within France. And that's what's happening in France. You're having a huge swath of the population is not being assimilated politically or culturally. They separate themselves. They have enclaves. Apparently some of those are no-drive zones for police. And that's what's happening in France. So, I'm sorry, Beltrame sustained 4 bullet wounds, but he died from the stab wounds. Okay, now, you'd think the story, that tragic and sad and outrageous story would end there, but it doesn't. It doesn't because something happened last month. And what happened last month was this. What happened last month was that the area around Marseille was going to honor Arnaud Beltrame with a square named in his honor, a town square named in his honor. Let me get the specifics of that in just a moment. Okay, so it was the 15th district, which is similar to Marseille. It's and in that 15th district, there is a huge community of immigrants from North Africa who practice, I guess, Sharia Islam. They call it a rigorous Islam. I can assume that what they mean is Sharia, and that Marseille has become a cesspool of jihadists. And by the way, in October 2017, an illegal immigrant from Tunisia in Marseille shouted "Allahu Akbar" before stabbing and killing 2 women. Okay, so that area is not a stranger to these kinds of incidents. Anyway, there was a recent town council meeting of the 7th district, of Marseille's 7th district, where they were going to announce the square dedicated to this Arnaud Beltrame, who was a hero by any sense of the word. He saved lives. He exchanged his life for other lives. And by any measure, that makes a hero. And you'd think that there wouldn't be opposition to naming a square in his honor. And yet there was. And the opposition came from the left. And so as described by Stéphane Ravière, who was Marseille's 7th district national rally mayor. I guess National Rally is one of the political parties. He revealed during a town council with Marseille's elected officials. This is what he revealed from that meeting. And I quote, "Leftist elected officials, socialist and communist, refused that a place in the 15th district be named after Arnaud Beltrame. In the first time, they've said, under fallacious pretext, that this place wasn't prestigious enough, before telling the truth in these terms." And this is what the leftists said. "We are on the field. We witnessed that the population has changed. And if we give the name of Arnaud Beltrame in this district, the population will take that as a provocation." God forbid one provokes jihadist Muslims and not give honor to a man who saved innocent lives by taking a bullet intended for others by a jihadist Muslim. That's the kind of provocation France actually needs to do if they want to take back their country. And all this happened because they allowed people from across their borders to come freely into their land, people who had no intention of honoring and respecting the culture that made France a great place. And that would include economic culture, and that includes a culture of true liberalism, of true tolerance. Instead, you have these self-entitled group of Islamists. They have freely come in because you didn't vet them, because France didn't vet them. And they are not becoming French people. They're not becoming French Muslims. They are not becoming Muslim Frenchmen. They are rejecting what is France, and they are taking over, and they are making the most foul expressions through violence and murder. Now, how does this connect with the caravan coming from Honduras? I mean, most of the people coming from Honduras are likely not Muslim or Islamist Muslims or Sharia Muslims or jihadist Muslims. They are, but many of them are coming, and as we see from a lot of illegal immigration that of people coming to the States, they don't assimilate. Many of the people who assimilated from South America, from Central and South America, who are Spanish speaking, don't learn English. All you have to do is visit Florida, or visit California, or visit parts of Texas, visit parts of Arizona or New Mexico. And you'll find places there where a lot of illegal immigrants, border jumpers, they come in, they work, they get a ton of benefits. No matter what anybody is telling you, they are getting benefits. They're getting education benefits, they're getting health benefits, healthcare benefits, they're getting tons of benefits. And at the same time, they are not assimilating, which is one of the reasons why you have a higher level of crime among illegal immigrants than you have among immigrants who are legal. Immigrants who are legal basically don't commit crimes. For the most part, they are the most law-abiding, the most pro-American, and many of them become the biggest success stories because they come to America for the values of freedom, of free markets, and of self-reliance. Many of the people coming from south of the border illegally are coming for the benefits. They're coming for, you would call it birthright tourism. In other words, they come for to make anchor babies. They have their babies on American soil. According to an erroneous interpretation of the 14th Amendment, the child is given automatically American citizenship, and then it serves as an anchor with which that baby becomes the nexus for bringing in family, relatives, including that baby's parents. That was not the intent of the 14th Amendment. And I know that has recently become an issue. I'm not going to go into that right now. Perhaps on another podcast we'll talk about the 14th Amendment. But that is a very important aspect in terms of how people who come into the country illegally are gaming the system. And it affects every American because every one of those illegal immigrants ends up costing the country, the taxpayer, about $50,000 apiece, if not more, at least. That's at least. In terms of the benefits and the efforts to deal with them and all that. All right, so that's something that, and we're seeing also, in some cases it gets violent, the self-entitlement that these illegals feel when they come in, and a country can't sustain itself like that. If a country in this day and age doesn't have, especially a country that gives so much in benefits to citizens in need, like the United States, if a country doesn't control its borders, a country doesn't exist for long. And like I said, all you have to do is look to Europe. Look to Europe because a country that doesn't have a common cultural element among its citizens doesn't remain a country for long also. There has to be some kind of cultural glue, even if it's an economic culture of free markets, a political culture of tolerance. Without the values that bind the country, that define the country, being commonly held by the vast majority of citizens, the country doesn't survive for long. And we're seeing that now. In this election, we're seeing an election of free market economics, American values of tolerance, against socialism, which is anti-free markets, which is for centralized control of the markets instead of laissez-faire, instead of a government protecting the freedom of the markets, protecting the freedom of opportunity, not the free stuff, but the freedom to present yourself, to work, to go to an employer, say, do you need a job done? The employer says yes, and there's a salary, and either the employee agrees to the salary or doesn't agree to the salary and goes to find work elsewhere to someone who will better appreciate the employee's talents and assets. I'm talking about their personal assets, their hard working, their expertise in certain matters, their intelligence. And this is something that that in a growing economy becomes a natural. In a growing economy, when there are more jobs than there are people to fill those jobs, the employee has a distinct advantage in being able to demand a salary that they feel justifies their time. And that is what a free market does. It matches those talents with the people who need those talents. And in a free market, there's a big incentive for people not to wait for the government to give them or to force somebody to pay them more money. But there's this big incentive to better yourself, to pack your toolkit with the best career tools. You lose that when you have the government dictating to employers what salaries should be. Okay, so I hope that was clear. That whole thing about the need to be careful about illegal immigration, because it does hurt, it does damage a country, and it can become violent. Okay, and to keep in mind Arnaud Jean-Georges Beltrame, a true hero, and to hope that France gets its act together and eventually honors this man. He deserves it. France deserves it. Okay, this week we saw something else. We saw another Project Veritas in New Israel. We saw another Project Veritas video come out, and we're seeing these Democrats from these Democratic Party staff members who, for these candidates, this is tomorrow is an election, by the way. We see them openly stating, well, they're not openly stating it. They think they're saying it to another worker, but it's really a Project Veritas Confederate, about how the candidates for whom they're working are essentially lying to their constituents and to the potential voters by saying that they are, for example, that they are against gun confiscation when in fact they are for gun confiscation. When they're saying that they are against single payer when in fact they are for single payer for healthcare and a complete government takeover of healthcare. When they're claiming that they are not open border supporters when in fact they are open border supporters. And just look for Project Veritas. I think there will be a link either on the screen or on the website, and you can take a look at that. And okay, finally, I want to talk about Israel itself and something that happened about a week or so ago. Okay, here we go. And this is from Israel Hayom. Israel cautioned against deducting martyr payments from Palestinian Authority tax revenues. Now, Israel basically collects taxes from the territories. They have the tax collection infrastructure, and what happens is, as part of the autonomy deal, Israel collects the Palestinian Authority taxes, the income taxes and the business taxes, whatever taxes they are, and then they send them back in payments to the Palestinian Authority. And Israel can freeze those payments and has freezed those payments in the past when the Palestinian Authority has promoted violence or in some other way violated the deal for their autonomy. And as you might know, the Palestinian Authority pays lifelong salaries to terrorists who kill Jews or who attempt to kill Jews. Whether they're killed in the attack, then they pay the families for life, or for I don't know for how long but they will pay them a stipend, or they pay them while these terrorists are in prison. And they call it pay for slay. The Palestinian Authority pays terrorists to kill Jews. And they pay it, of course, from the taxes that Israel has collected and turned over to the Palestinian Authority. Well, now Israel has the Knesset passed a law stating that from now on, I don't know when it starts, but Israel will hold back an amount of money from the taxes collected equivalent to how much the Palestinian Authority would have paid or does pay or has paid to terrorists to kill Jews. It seems almost natural. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem crazy or at all any crazier than it is that the Palestinian Authority, which still supports jihadists and the murders of Jews, and has now a partnership with Hamas, which is open about its intent to kill Jews and destroy Israel, it certainly is reasonable for the Israelis to withhold this money, to give some of the money over to the Palestinian Authority, but to withhold the money they would pay to terrorists as salary. And by the way, it turns out that the Palestinian Authority is $1 billion in debt. In other words, with all the aid that they get, they are $1 billion in debt. I'm going to read you the newsletter from Israel Hayom, and this is from yesterday. No, I'm sorry, it's from this morning. Palestinian Authority already has $1 billion deficit and would be pushed to a breaking point if Israel implements the law to deduct stipends paid to terrorists from tax funds Israel collects for the PA, a UN Middle East envoy and European officials have said. The UN Middle East envoy Nikolai Mladenov and European officials have repeatedly warned Israel that the Palestinian Authority could collapse if Israel implements a law to deduct stipends paid to terrorists from the tax revenue Israel collects on the PA's behalf. Diplomatic officials relayed messages to Jerusalem saying that implementing the law would bring the PA, already in a dire financial situation, to its breaking point and could cause a complete system failure. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm taking a break from this. Oh my gosh. The Palestinian Authority, a terrorist entity, okay, is in a dire financial situation, and the UN wants to bail them out. The UN wants to bail them out some more. Okay, and they're saying that this could lead to a breaking point and cause a complete system failure. Well, tell that to the families whose family members have been shot by terrorists infiltrating into settlements and into towns. Okay, and then whose families, these terrorists, their families, get paid while the mourners and have destroyed families. Their families are destroyed. Their lives are wrecked. Tell that to the people who have been have survived bomb. Forget about, remember the people who have died, but let's focus on the people who have survived bombings and still have shrapnel in their bodies and can't walk anymore. I'm talking about adults and children. We don't hear a lot about the survivors of terrorist attacks. But for them, their lives have been devastated, and their families' lives are devastated because they need care, which they otherwise wouldn't have needed if some Islamic jihadist throwback hadn't decided to make a point and spread misery, sowed seeds and reaped a harvest of blood and misery. For what? And it's mind-boggling. Anyway, to continue. The officials said the PA already has $1 billion deficit, and if the law is implemented, donor countries would stop paying for the PA's daily operations. Oh my gosh. Donor countries would stop paying for the PA. And maybe the PA would either be sacked by the citizens, and maybe a real government intended to protect the rights of individuals to make a decent living instead of pouring money into terror and into indoctrination and maybe into losing money through the embezzlement of these kleptocratic leaders like Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, who is now in his 13th year of a 4-year term. Okay. And they said that it would, and these countries might instead fund humanitarian projects. Whoa, how is that a negative? How is that a negative if European donors took the money they pay without question to the Palestinian Authority, to these thieves and these murderers in the Palestinian Authority, and instead focused those payments on humanitarian organizations, real humanitarian organizations, which might provide food and shelter and clothing to poor Arabs in Judea and Samaria and maybe help them build businesses instead of indoctrinating them to kill Jews? What a travesty that would be. The so-called terrorist payments law was enacted 6 months ago. It stipulates that at the beginning of every calendar year, Israel's defense minister must report to the cabinet the total amount paid by the Palestinian Authority to terrorists imprisoned in Israel and their families. After which the minister must withhold that amount from the tax revenues Israel collects for the Palestinian Authority. The funds are to be deposited in a trust until the Palestinians stop using them to encourage terrorism. Do you hear that? They're not saying that they're confiscating the money. Israel is not going to confiscate the money, even though that would be paid to terrorists. All they're saying is they're going to hold the money until the Palestinian Authority stops paying terrorists. Now, if it was me, if I was in charge, I would say the Palestinian Authority, who pays terrorists, has forfeited its right to that money, has forfeited any right to any money it would pay to terrorists to kill Jews. That is common sense to me. Israel, its latest law that is trying to remove the incentive to pay terrorists, it doesn't even go that far. It just holds the money for them. Like as if they're saying, okay, now, it's like you say to a 5-year-old, okay, stop your tantrum, stop kicking and thrashing, and when you stop, you'll get the ice cream sandwich. When you stop, you'll get the piece of candy. Just calm down. No. If it was me, it was, okay, listen, you've thrown a tantrum, you lose the ice cream for today. If you want the ice cream tomorrow, behave. If you want the ice cream tomorrow, if the Palestinian Authority wants its next year's payments that it would have paid to terrorists, but instead should pay towards helping its people, if you want that money next year, you have a spotless year this year. You don't support any indoctrination of killing Jews. You don't support any terrorist attacks. You don't name streets after mass murderers and serial murderers. You don't name streets after jihadists. And maybe you'll get next year's money, but not this year's money. This year's money goes to the victims of those terrorists. This year's tax collected money goes to the girl who lost her arm or the boy who lost his eyes. Okay. Anyway, it would be nice. You know something? I think about Donald Trump. Okay, I wasn't pro-Trump during the primaries in the United States 2 years ago. I was a Ted Cruz guy, and Donald Trump acted disgustingly in that election. And if Ted Cruz had not come out and endorsed Trump, I wouldn't have voted for him. I am so glad that Cruz did endorse Trump, and I did vote for Trump, because it turned out that as disgusting as he was during the campaign, he has done some very good things. And one of the things he does is he makes it very clear around the world, to friend and foe alike, that if you damage the United States or United States interests, it doesn't go unpunished. And it doesn't go unpunished lightly. Okay, in a couple of days, new sanctions are being implemented against Iran. Barack Obama gave Iran like a couple $1 billion in cash. Okay, but now Donald Trump has announced is implementing new sanctions. And instead of waiting to see how upset the Iranians are going to get, he's dispatching Marines and naval warships to the Straits of Hormuz to make sure that Iran doesn't try any crap. Okay? That's how you deal with countries who are trying to harm you. You don't play nice with them. You don't treat them like, you don't treat them as you would a friend who's made an error. You treat them as enemies. And if they are going to harm you or try to harm you, you make them pay a price. You don't just hold off a gift or hold off a payment until later when you give the payment back. No. Donald Trump would not act this way if someone was treating the U.S. the way the Palestinian Authority is treating Israel in terms of these payments, this pay-to-slay thing. Donald Trump would make them lose the payment. Okay, that's all from the two Israels today. I wish you a great day. Shalom. Elections in the United States are tomorrow. May God bless America, and may God's wisdom guide America and the state of Israel. And I wish you all the best.